Hello, and welcome back to the channel Cool Shirts United, where we sometimes talk about Pokemon as well. Please feast your eyes. Is this not a beautiful shirt? I got it for like $5. It was one of the greatest buys of my life, but we're not here to talk about shirts, actually. This is not the channel. It is not called Lambo Cool Shirts. It is called Lambo Pokemon. So, what are we talking about today? I will tell you, we are talking about another core that right now we're doing like defensive cores. I may or may not do offensive cores. But what you're looking at right now is sort of like a hybrid. This is the Psychic fighting Dark, and it kind of has that like fire, water, grass thing where they go in a circle with Psychic beats fighting, fighting beats Dark, Dark beats Psychic, and they also do it defensively as well. So it kind of works like the fire, water, grass in that way. But it kind of has that same weakness that like fire, water, grass cores can sometimes have, where, you know, they don't completely guard against everything. Like for instance, flying beats grass types, and neither water nor fire cover up that weakness. So you kind of have to cover that up other places. And so, Psychic fighting Dark has that issue with fairy type. Sorry, I got like an eyelash or something that's bugging me a little bit. It's probably going to be bugging me the whole video. So if I keep doing this, that's what I'm trying to do. So it has this issue with fairy types. But just to talk a little bit more about the core and what they do for each other, I should probably start there. Psychic gets beaten by Bug, Dark, Ghost. Dark covers the Dark and Ghost weakness. Fighting will cover the Bug weakness. Fighting is going to get beat by Flying, and neither Psychic nor Dark cover that. But it also gets beat by Psychic a lot, and both of them get covered for that weakness. Fairy does not get covered, and Dark is also weak to Fairy. So it's a core that's pretty weak to Fairy types. But what is really good about Psychic Dark fighting is that it's also a really good offensive core, and it is very hard to stop offensively. But this is not a video about offensive cores. So as you can see, these three mons that we have on the screen are not necessarily a bad trio. They have like good things going for them. They even have Stealth Rock. They have double removal because Conk gets defogged now. And honestly, it's not something that you particularly want to play against, but it's not something that is going to be the defensive backbone of a team. So if you are trying to work in this Psychic, Dark, one other type into a defensive backbone of your team, which is entirely possible, what I suggest for you instead of the fighting type to complete the defensive core, not that you can't have a fighting type on your team because the rest of your team needs to synergize with this as well, but in terms of three type cores, I suggest that you fill this out with either a steel, a fire, or a poison type. And what that does, right over the fighting type, what that does is it provides that bug resistance that you really need for the Dark and the Psychic type, but then it also covers that fairy weakness that fighting and Dark have together. And so we have Psychic Dark Poison that's covered, Psychic Dark Steel that's covered, Psychic Dark Fire that's covered. And there are trade-offs between what you choose, and it's possible that you have Psychic Dark and then all three of these types on your team, which is great because then it adds more versatility into your team. But you just got to kind of think what kind of league this is and what you're going to be playing against, and plan accordingly from there. You also want something to pick up toxic spikes. But in terms of three type cores, let's take a look at how this can play out. So let's say we get two pretty high tiers, Mandibuzz and Mew, and they have really good defensive synergy in general. And they're both extremely bulky and have a lot of defensive utility. And we want to fill out I suppose Mandibuzz isn't particularly weak to bug, but it doesn't cover the bug weakness that Mew has, but it covers the Dark and Ghost weaknesses that it has. And we're still weak to fairy here as well. So we can fill this out with a couple. I chose a couple like mid to low tier fire, poison, steel types that can work here. Obviously, as always, these are not exhaustive. These are just a couple of ideas, and these aren't like super thought through either. It's just bases for ideas as well. So I picked Scorch because it's a pretty low tier. It's got pretty good defensive utility, and it's a fire type that provides that really good bug resistance and really good fairy resistance. Wheezing, again, does the exact same thing. The good thing about a poison type or a steel type in this core as well is that not only does it protect against the fairy types defensively, but they also apply a little more offensive pressure. So fairy is weak to poison and steel. So if you fill this out with a steel or poison type over a fire type, then that can pressure fairy types a lot more offensively as well. So it's not just a sitting duck kind of core. It has some sort of way to push back against the fairies. But again, there's always trade-offs. So if you want to have this team or you have this psychic dark core and you fill it out with a poison or a steel type, you got to look at what you're playing in your league, because if you play something like a Volcarona will absolutely steamroll this core unless your steel type is Heatran. But Heatran's also a fire type. So you got to think. If you're going to fill this core out as a defensive backbone for your team, and you're going to have the defensive backbone be dark, psychic, and steel, then you really want to consider having some other good defensive play to beat Volcarona, because Volcarona can just steamroll with bug and fire. With poison, it at least has to tech on psychic as well. But fire types, a good defensive fire type can help patch that up a little bit better. But if you're not expecting to play Volcarona, or you're only going to play it one time in the entire season, and you're like, okay, I can check it some other way on my team, then maybe we can utilize some other thing in this core. And likewise, maybe you have two decent defensive cores. Maybe you're doing like a Fairy Dragon Steel and a Dark Psychic and Steel core. And then maybe your Steel type has dual purpose. One thing I want to say about the Steel type in this as well is, if you're going to have this Steel type be a dual purpose for these two types of cores, you don't want a Steel Psychic type like Jirachi, which can function great in a Fairy Dragon Steel core. But if your Jirachi is the Psychic and the Steel, it's not resistant to bug. So you're going to want to cover up the bug weakness somewhere else. So again, this is a team by team thing. This is theory. This is based on what you are going to be playing in your league. This is based on what other mons you have on your team. This is also dependent on how many mons you're drafting. If you're in an 8-mon draft, that is more important to have a more catch-all core in a fewer mons than it is if you're playing like one of these ridiculous 12-mon leagues where you have like basically 2 full teams. It's like, in that, these cores are a little bit less important, and you don't have to think about it quite as much because you can have single mon text for certain matchups. So this is basis, and I also want to show you how this can function in some of the other cores just for fun, because we've talked about fire, water, grass, and it's possible that your fire, water, grass also functions as a dark psychic fire. So right here you see Zerud is dark and grass type. We have the Slow King, which is water and psychic, and we have Moltres. So not only is this a fire, water, grass core, but this is also a dark psychic fire core. So when you think about it in the context of that, you pick up a little more resistances, you drop a couple more things here and there, you start mixing the weaknesses and the strengths of the 2 cores. So this team would benefit really. it would benefit from one, a flying resist, and two, a rock resist. So what you really want is a good steel type with this. Or another thing that you could work with here is like a Rhyperior or something, you know, because Rhyperior will provide the flying resist with the rock typing, and also be a ground type, and we'll fill this out. So you know, you just gotta think about it. And I haven't thought through everything that could possibly threaten that core, but you know, when you're drafting, just think about it. Look at what other people are drafting. If you're in one of those huge tours that has 256 people, make sure you really think about anything that you could possibly play, because you're going to be playing a huge mix of teams, and multiple people could draft the same mon. But this one is a little bit better against Volcarona, because Moltres actually has some really good defensive utility against that, and even Slowking could probably live a single hit from it, and Zerud can at least U-turn out or outspeed it before it boosts. So that's kind of a mix between the two cores, and you can also mix this with a Dream Core. So check this out. This is cool. This is Hydreigon, Gardevoir, and Registeel. So you see you have Fairy, Dragon, Steel, with Hydreigon being the Dragon, Gardevoir, Fairy, Registeel, Steel type. And like I said, also Dark, Psychic, Steel. So you kind of have that dual defensive utility. Hydreigon and Registeel are both struggling versus fighting types, obviously, but Gardevoir is a really good fighting type check. And something that I really like about this squad is that it's also a very good offensive core. Hydreigon can also work well with defensive utility with like a Steel Psychic type. You just need a really good bug check in the back as well. So if you ran something like Hydreigon, Jirachi, both have good offensive synergy and defensive synergy as well. So that's an interesting core that you could play around with, and you just need to make sure that you patch up the fighting and bug resistances a little bit better in the back. But in terms of two mons that can check a lot and provide a lot of offensive pressure, that's a pretty good mix. So after that, we are going to go ahead and take a look at two more just example cores that I came up with. This one is going to be a little more budget friendly, and it's a little more of a defensive backbone and a little less offensive pressuring. So Umbreon and Uxie are both very useful mons, but can be a little more passive. Not completely, because you have foul play, and you have Uxie can run some cool sets. It's got a huge move pool. But you can see how they cover each other's weaknesses, you know. Even outside of the straight Dark, Psychic, Fire core that we are examining right here, we also have Uxie that is levitating to help Marowak, and we have Marowak is also immune to fighting type to doubly help Umbreon, and obviously Marowak is a very good bug resist. It is a very good fairy resist. I mean, Marowak is might as well be immune to bug types. You know, it's 4 times resistant. And the other great thing is Uxie and Marowak don't have healing. Umbreon can pass wishes to it. And this one isn't going to break the bank, you know? So if you were looking for... If you went a little more offensive with your higher tiered mons, and you're like, well, shoot, I still need a strong defensive backbone, but I don't have a whole ton of points left, then this is something that you could probably get in the mid-tier range, but still has really good defensive utility for a lot of matchups. And last, I just wanted to show another one with a poison type. And again, this is, you know how I made these cores? This is something that might be very useful for you guys if you don't think about it, and you're trying to think like, what's a good dark type? Literally just search dark, click dark, look down here, look at these mons, be like, okay, Greninja, dark type, does it have a whole lot of defensive utility? Not really. Tyranitar, yes, it has a decent amount of defensive utility, but can really struggle with fighting types. All my team is already a little bit weak to fighting types. Let's scroll a little bit further down. Some of these not super good, but maybe Crocodile. Maybe Crocodile is helpful because like I said, maybe the team's a little bit weak to fighting types already, but Crocodile, although it's weak to fighting type, will at least provide some sort of intimidate support, and then we can get a good fighting resist as the last. So let's throw Crocodile into the mix. Just search the type that you're looking for. Look down this list. Look for defensive utility. Think about how it synergizes with the rest of your team. So I decided I wanted to build this core. I'm like, you know what? I want it to be a dark psychic poison core, just for the example of this video. So I searched dark type. I'm like, okay, well, let's say you drafted Mega Sableye onto your team, which is a dark type that honestly, like this core, if you hate fighting types, this is like, you can have the rest of your team weak to fighting types, and this core is still going to completely patch up any sort of fighting weakness because they all dunk on fighting types. But what I'm looking at now, actually, so this is something that I didn't necessarily think about because I threw it together pretty quickly, and I was like, let's throw Sableye on here. I'm looking at this now. I'm like, okay, well, maybe this core isn't a super good dark psychic poison core because your dark type is supposed to be resistant to ghost and dark to cover the weaknesses of your psychic type, and to because your poison, fire, and steel type probably won't resist that either. So as we can see here, Sableye actually doesn't either of those things. So let's do this on the fly, Maybe Sableye isn't a great choice for this core. Maybe if you had some sort of poison type that also resisted dark somehow, like maybe Sableye could work then, but maybe that doesn't work here. So let's look at Cresselia and Crobat. Cresselia is very weak to bug, dark, ghost. Crobat is a really good bug resist. Crobat is also a poison resist, so that is all cleared up. We definitely need a dark type to resist ghost and dark types. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, something that could work here if you were like absolutely strapped on points is Wigglytuff, because Wigglytuff could provide that dark and ghost immunity. And this is looking like a little more stally of a team anyway with this kind of backbone. But let's be a little more offensive about it. Let's provide a little more offensive presence. So let's think about it. Yeah, I mean, if we want a little more offensive presence, we can go with Drapion. We can go with Crocodile. Let's think about it a little bit. How does Crocodile fit into this? I can tell you one that Crobat is weak to electric, so Crocodile helps patch that up because it is a electric immune. One thing it doesn't help with is ice weakness. So this is actually another ice weakness. So if we want to go with Crocodile in this core, we definitely want to patch up the ice weakness elsewhere on the team. If the team is already looking a little ice weak, then Crocodile is definitely not a good choice here. It's definitely a good ghost and dark resist, especially if this is a league that has pursuit in it. If it's a league that has pursuit, we can really patch up the ghost weaknesses with Crocodile. Maybe we have a fairy and a fighting type on our team, so so it doesn't need to check dark types quite as much because we have a decent amount of dark types. But maybe we don't have a really good ghost resist. Maybe we didn't draft a normal type on the team. If we didn't draft a good normal type on the team, and this is the league without pursuit, maybe Crocodile is going to get overwhelmed by ghost types. But maybe if it's a league with pursuit, and maybe we have a good fairy and a dark type on, or a good fairy and a fighting type on our team. So Crocodile doesn't need to be the only check to dark types. And if we have pursuit, then Crocodile can pursuit the ghost type. So that actually patches up the core's weakness really well. So, you got to think through these things. Think about, how does this work in with the rest of the team? How's this going to work in actual games when we start playing? Because this is all working well in theory, but if you think about certain matchups, well, I'm looking at the other teams in my league, and maybe they have something that is completely going to dunk on this. Like, I don't know, maybe they have uh, bug electric can beat this core, let's say. So I don't know, Vikavolt might still get overwhelmed by this because it's kind of slow, but just an example that its stab combination might provide a difficulty for this core. Or Tapu Koko. You know, Tapu Koko can be a little bit annoying for this as well with Fairy type U-turn out on Cresselia and Electric for Crobat. So you just got to think about this. Think about how the rest of the team looks and how we can beat that, and if these matchups are just going to be difficult or if they're going to be impossible. Because what you really want to do with your team is make sure that you don't have any really impossible matchups if you can. Ideally, you would have favorable matchups across the board and maybe a couple of more difficult matchups, but you definitely don't want anything that's going to be like completely impossible, because you could really just get screwed by luck of the draw in that case. So anyway, that's it for our third 3-type core. It is Psychic, Dark, and then either Poison, Steel, or Fire type. And if you want it to be a little more offensive and you have enough fairy checks on your team already because you got a great Steel and a great Poison type, then you can also just throw a Fighting type on this as a bug check, and it's a little more offensive. So that is it for today, gang. I will catch you all on the flip side.